violins, you have to be really clear. Ah, yeah, this E natural, right? It's not Debussy, it's Bruckner. It has to be clear.
Dear Maestro Джъд, it's a great honor for us that you are the guest conductor of the Sofia Philharmonic Orchestra. What are your impressions of the orchestra? This is your fourth time as a guest conductor here.
Well, I'm happy you asked that question because my experience each time has been that the orchestra is genuinely growing and stronger and more ensemble playing. The orchestra gets better and better. And especially for this week, it's challenging because I think the first time they're playing this Bruckner Symphony, number one, and it's a very special language, a style of playing for everybody. So I'm having a lovely time. I mean, I really enjoy, and I'm very happy and grateful for the invitation.
Please tell us about the program that you will conduct. It's entirely from Romantic era, and Bruckner, the First Symphony, will be performed for the first time by the Sofia Philharmonic.
Well, it's a lovely program. I mean, before we talk about Bruckner, the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, I'm looking forward to, because Ziu is a friend of mine. We've played the Mendelssohn twice before, two different orchestras last year, and he's such a wonderful musician. And he has all of the technique for this extraordinary showpiece of Mendelssohn. But it's a romantic work for sure, but it's so classical as well, isn't it? It's between, and you could not imagine one note could be differently written. It's a perfect concerto. And I think a lovely, how can we say, big appetizer before Bruckner. And the Bruckner Symphony is a very special work because although it's Symphony number 1, he did write 2 symphonies before, so more experimental, I suppose. And interesting of the First Symphony is he obviously really loved it because more than 20 years after he'd written it, when he was in Vienna, he revised it. He went back, not because sometimes with Bruckner he was very unconfident, and conductors or friends would tell him, oh, you should make these changes. So sometimes maybe he gave in to insecurity and made changes in his symphonies. But with this one, I think it was his own desire to make a new version for Vienna. And he spent, after the 8th Symphony, he had revised the 8th Symphony, this huge piece. Before he started writing the 9th Symphony, he spent more than 1 whole year on the revision of this First Symphony. So I think we can deduce from that it really meant a lot to him as a symphony. And it is different from the more mature symphonies in the style sometimes, but it's unmistakably Bruckner. And sometimes it's not just so serious, it's also got a sense of humor sometimes, but always connected to this profound spirituality that we find in all Bruckner's music, And so it's a very special style for the orchestra to play, because it's pure music. There's no effect in Bruckner. He doesn't use a lot of percussion, doesn't use effects. It's just pure musical argument, rather like Schubert. There's nothing excess. It's just pure music. So orchestra has to find conductor. We are all searching ourselves for the spirit of the music, and it's the opposite. It's an antithesis of modern life in a way.
And which version of the First Symphony we will perform?
We will play the later version, this Vienna version.
Why?
Because I've done the other version, which I love. The other version from Linz, from the 60s, it's pure emotion. I love it because it's just him enjoying writing a symphony, right? But this version, I love it because I respect that he took the trouble to make this revision, himself conducted it, and heard it many times. So I just find it very interesting. Both versions are perfect, but we do this revised version this time because it was, and maybe he spent so long on the revision that the Ninth Symphony he could not complete. So coming after the Eighth, if he hadn't revised this, maybe he would have started the Ninth Symphony earlier and we would have had more movements in the Ninth Symphony.
Do you think that a conductor is an intermediary between the composer and the audience, or an interpreter?
I think both, because I mean, as a conductor, we really do study a long time. We try, to the best of our ability, to convey the spirit of the composer. We don't know exactly what tempo, but the spirit of the music, right? So it's not just the conductor, it's all musicians on stage. And the conductor is a kind of catalyst to try to convey the music to the audience with the musicians. So it's not a question of composer, conductor, musicians, audience. We all really should be one. So I suppose, in a way, the conductor becomes the recreator. When you come to perform, you have the responsibility of being the composer.
What is most enjoyable thing in your profession? Maybe communicating with the orchestra or something else? Most important and enjoyable.
Yes, I mean, I think it's enjoyable and a huge privilege to be a conductor, because a conductor is one musician, and the timpanist is one musician, the third flute is one musician. Everybody is one musician, and all, as you know, the great conductors will always say, and I had the privilege of being assistant with Abado for many, many years. He would always say, and George Zell in Cleveland, always say, it's the greatest symphonies, it's all chamber music, you know, that when we're playing with 80 players or more, it's still just chamber music, listening to one another. And conductor is just shaping a little bit, giving some ideas and a structure, but I can't do anything if the musicians are not also involved at the same level. And so great joy for me, especially as I get older as a conductor, my absolute joy and feeling of privilege is of working with musicians and trying to get their best energy. And in case of Bruckner, it's a special energy. I told the orchestra this morning, it's not the energy we find today as we're looking at computers and text and worrying about the terrible problems in the world. And, you know, it's a very fast energy. Bruckner is a spiritual energy. And I think in this day and age, it's the most marvelous music for us, the audience, the musicians, and for young people. Come and listen to Bruckner. It gives you a sense of space. It's like climbing the mountains and communicating with a higher power. I'm not talking of religion, just it puts us in the universe. It's something that communicates with everything before and everything after. So that's our job, I think, as conductor, you know, to try to have that feeling of unanimity, sense of purpose with the musicians.
And which composer is closer to you today?
Well, it's funny you ask that, because, I mean, my answer is always comes back to Bach, although we don't conduct Bach very often, you know. But for me, you know, the music of Bach is the inspiration for all the great composers. Of course, there were great composers before Bach, and he borrowed a lot, but he somehow put everything from the past together, and he connected the same spiritual aspect of music, Bruckner, and then all the great composers. Mozart would have been slightly different without Bach. Mahler, Bruckner would have been different. Stravinsky would have been different. But then, honestly, if I only had one composer, you said, for the rest of your life, one composer, where I'm right now, Bruckner would be very close to the top of the list. I just love the world of Bruckner, the sound and the flexibility of his music. And I mean, I love conducting Mahler too, and Brahms. But yeah, Bruckner would be really, I'd be happy if you said only Bruckner for the next 30 years.
You have a remarkable career in the world. Do you have a favorite orchestra?
Oh, that's hard to say. Actually, I kind of do, if I may, because I've been going to New Zealand, to the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, which is a great orchestra, a long way away, but a world-class orchestra. Now, I was music director there. I went there first in the end of the last century, long time ago, and I'm music director emeritus, so I go many times to work with them. And I have a very close relationship with them over all of these years, 30 years almost. And so there I find the music making very easy, and I find their soul. But, you know, every time I'm with an orchestra like your beautiful orchestra, I can't imagine being anywhere else. It's just this lovely kind of conversation, musical conversation between musician and conductor. And so, you know, that's my answer. I suppose it's just the familiarity I have with New Zealand Symphony. And I go out there to New Zealand 3-4 times every year, spend quite a lot of time.
Do you see a difference between European orchestras and the orchestras in the US, in New Zealand?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a huge difference between different European orchestras. And when you're conducting in France, there's a certain style of playing. You think of the school of Berlin and Vienna, they're quite different sounding orchestras, actually. And in Czech and Slovak here. I think the great national orchestras do have a characteristic, and that's so important. Like, we should not all speak English. Thank you for speaking English, but you know, language is so important. The Welsh language, the English language, the Irish language from where I come from. And the same thing with orchestras, a certain style, a certain way of phrasing, connected to the language probably. I think that's important and fascinating, and it still exists today.
What is your most memorable experience, concert experience?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. I mean, I've had some memorable experiences conducting. Immediately comes to mind one of my favorite pieces, Mahler, Ninth Symphony. And I remember doing that on tour years ago with the European Community Youth Orchestra when I was Abado's assistant, and doing tours myself with them, and of playing Mahler Ninth Symphony in Spain and in Portugal. When the concert was so late, we were starting the last movement, that great adagio of Mahler Ninth Symphony, and outside the theater we heard midnight, the bells start. And that's always, you know, things like that stick with you. It's like a ghostly presence. And one of the most beautiful aspects of conducting a symphony like that, or all kinds of other music too, is that beautiful silence that lasts afterwards. You know, when the music just goes on in people's heads, and you don't really want applause, you just carry the music into your next day and your next week. And I remember those experiences, yeah.
Where does classical music belong in today's dynamic world?
I think it belongs more and more. It's very easy to dismiss, because the problem is, as you know, you're running an orchestra, it costs so much money. And you think, well, why do you need so many violins? Why do you need this? Why do you need that? It's very difficult to justify all over the world when people have less, and politicians and businessmen don't necessarily have music at school and in their upbringing, and young people like we used to. So it makes it more and more difficult to explain the value of what we do, because it costs a lot of money. So it's very important right now that we are all advocates in the community to build music and give music to younger people, because it's still so important. And it's not a question of liking rock music or pop music or whatever kind of latest popular music or classical music. We should love all, because it's the same 12 notes in different instruments, different order. And I honestly feel that if we can encourage anybody in the street to come in to listen to a Bruckner symphony or whatever it is, and we make them feel comfortable, you don't have to understand anything. You just have to open your ears and your mind. And we have today exactly the same core emotions that Bach had, and that Mozart had, that Bruckner had, that Mahler had. It's the same language that we all have, whatever our life, whatever our background. And so this feeling of coming together and sharing these pure emotions in a world of such full of lies and contradiction and antagonism, it's more and more valuable and important. So we have to fight this battle to maintain the great, musical institutions in the world.
Your next projects after the concert in Sofia?
Next project is a concert in Buenos Aires, actually, long way away, and that's Strauss Heldenleben, and then Mendelssohn Violin Concerto with a different violinist. And then my next project is my daughter getting married. So, and then after she's married, I go, next is China. I'll go to Beijing and Shanghai.
If you have to describe your character with musical terms, who would it be?
Ooh.
With musical terms.
Ooh. I don't know. That's a great question. Nobody asked me before. I'm sure people would have a lot of different opinions. What would it be? I hope molto sostenuto, because I would like to do this for another half century.
Thank you, Maestro.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.